in the mirror. Go ahead. Stare into it. What do you see? A man? A leader? A survivor? A mask? The truth is, what you're looking at isn't you. It never was. Jacques Lacan called it the mirror stage. It's the moment you first mistook your reflection for your identity. When you were a child, crawling, incomplete, fragmented, you looked into the mirror and saw something whole. You believed that was you. That moment, that illusion, became the blueprint for every lie you've lived since. That's the first prison. You don't know who you are. You only know who you've pretended to be. From the moment you could stand, you were trained to perform, trained to build an image that could be accepted, loved, and praised. You copied what worked. You rejected what didn't. And somewhere along the way, the real you was buried under masks you forgot you were wearing. You built an ego, not out of essence, but out of reflection. You became what others told you looked strong, sounded smart, seemed successful. But that man in the mirror, he's hollow. He is not your soul. He is a sculpture carved by your need to belong. This is the male tragedy Lacan exposed. You confuse your image with your being. You spend your life chasing the approval of others, thinking that if the reflection smiles back, if the world reflects validation, you've made it. But you haven't made it. You've become a slave to your reflection. You measure your strength in likes, in compliments, in a gaze, in their applause. You measure your masculinity by how attractive, how composed, how controlled you appear to be. But this appearance is a betrayal, because every time you adjust yourself to look better in the mirror of society, you lose another piece of what makes you real. And here's what they never told you. The mirror lies. It feeds your ego and starves yourself. It offers coherence, but no authenticity. And if you're not careful, you'll become an actor in your own life, reading lines written by people who never had the guts to live honestly. You are not that man. You are something deeper, something darker, something more dangerous. And that's why they trained you to stay loyal to the mirror. Because if you ever looked away from it, if you ever stopped chasing the reflection and turned inward, you'd become a threat. A man who no longer seeks validation is a man who cannot be controlled. And this is where your real war begins. You've spent years trying to fix the image. Gym selfies, filtered truths, perfect resumes, carefully crafted personalities. You think if you can polish the reflection enough, you'll finally feel whole. But the hole inside you can't be filled with approval. That emptiness, that's the space where your real self was supposed to grow. But it didn't, because you were too busy feeding the reflection. Lacan teaches that we mistake the image for the self, and that mistake breeds neurosis, anxiety, and paralysis. Why do you feel so unsure of yourself, even when others admire you? Why do you feel fake, even when you're successful? Why does every compliment feel like a lie you've somehow fooled them into believing? Because they are reacting to the image, not the man. And deep down, you know it. You know you've built a false self. You know you're performing. You know that everything you've crafted, the good guy, the intellectual, the emotionally available man, the high-value male, is just an illusion designed to survive. But survival is not life, and approval is not love. So what happens if you stop performing? What happens if you break the mirror? What happens if you stop trying to be seen and start trying to see yourself? Most men never do, because the moment you reject the mirror, you're left with nothing but the fragments, the chaos, the shadows. And that's terrifying, because all your life you've avoided those pieces. You've been taught they're wrong. Your anger, your fear, your lust, your dominance, your madness. But they're not wrong. They're real, and they're yours. Lacan called it the real, the part of you that can't be symbolized, can't be reduced to language or image, the primal you, the chaotic you, the self that lives beyond words and reflections. That's the man you were meant to become. But the system told you he was too much, too intense, too raw, too male. So you obeyed. You traded your real for a mask. You sacrificed yourself on the altar of social approval. And now you wear a smile carved out of fear. But the mirror is cracking. That's why you're here. That's why you can't sleep. That's why you feel like a ghost in your own body. Because the real you is clawing at the edges of the lie, desperate to be born. And you know what that means? It means the war is about to begin. Because once you awaken, the world will turn against you. She will tell you you've changed. The crowd will say you become arrogant, unpredictable, even dangerous. But they're not reacting to you. They're reacting to the fact that you've stopped reflecting them. You've stopped mirroring their expectations. You've stopped playing their game. And in a world of reflections, the man who lives authentically is a heretic. But you were never meant to fit in. You were meant to break the illusion, to walk away from the mirror into the unknown, into the wilderness of your own becoming. You were meant to confront the real, not as a monster, but as your birthright. This isn't self-improvement. This is self-obliteration. You will not decorate the mask. You will tear it off. You will not polish the reflection. You will shatter it. Because until you destroy the image, you will never meet the man. And that man, he is waiting. Not in the gym, not on social media, not in her validation, in the silence, in the shadow, in the place you've avoided your entire life. He is waiting to be born, through your pain, through your rage, through your surrender to the truth that you've been hiding from yourself. The question is, will you look away from the mirror long enough to find him? You think you speak, but in reality, you're being spoken. That's what Lacan meant when he said, the unconscious is structured like a language. You're not as free as you think. Your identity, your I am, isn't coming from within. It's coded, programmed, installed. From the moment you learned words, you learned submission. You were told who you were, not asked. You were labeled, measured, defined. Boy, student, brother, quiet, nice, helpful, strong, but not too strong. Ambitious, but not too ambitious. Assertive, but never aggressive. And just like that, you began to speak their language and lost your own. Every time you called yourself something, you limited yourself. Every time someone told you, you're a good guy, you reinforced the mask. Every time you tried to be normal, you locked another door inside yourself and threw away the key. Lacan calls it the symbolic order, the system of language, norms, categories, and roles that binds you without chains. It defines your position in society. It tells you what you're allowed to want, what you're allowed to express, what you're allowed to be, and you accepted it. You took your place in the grid like a good boy. You conformed, you behaved, you said the right things, not the real things. You dated how they told you. You worked where they approved. You thought the thoughts that wouldn't offend anyone, and they praised you for it. They told you you were mature, responsible, respectful, feminist, emotionally intelligent. And so you nodded, smiled, adapted, and felt your soul shrink every time you did. You traded the chaos of truth for the safety of a script. But scripts don't liberate you. They domesticate you. Look around. You're surrounded by domesticated men. Housebroken males trained to sit, fetch, and roll over on command. They call it progress. They call it equality. They call it emotional maturity. But what it really is castration. You've been taught to fear your own desire, to question your instinct, to distrust your hunger, to apologize for your power. You've been told that to be loved, you must be soft, passive, contained, gentle. But the truth is, she doesn't want that version of you. Not really. She may say she does, She may say she wants the safe man, the soft man, the man who listens and never disagrees. But deep down, she's testing you. She's watching to see if there's anything wild left in you, anything untamed, anything real, because no woman truly respects a man she can control. And yet, you've become controlled, not by her, but by the symbolic, by the roles you've inherited, by the definitions you never questioned. You've become fluent in a language that hates your nature, and every time you speak it, you reinforce the prison. But Lacan didn't just diagnose this disease, he pointed to the cure. To awaken, you must break the code. You must learn to see where the words you speak are not your own. You must identify the places where your thoughts are echoes, not origin. Where your desires are marketed, not born. Where your beliefs were chosen for you long before you ever thought to question them. This is what real masculinity demands. Not rebellion, but rewriting. Not tantrums, not reaction, but revolution. Internal, symbolic, surgical. You must become a man who speaks from the core. A man who reclaims language, strips it of its manipulations, and forges a voice forged in truth, not approval. That's the only way to escape the trap, because the trap is clever. It doesn't punish you with violence. It seduces you with rewards. Good grades, good behavior, good man, good partner, good employee. You're praised for your obedience. And over time, you mistake that praise for love. But it's not love, it's training. And what they're training you to be is harmless. You weren't born for that. You weren't born to be safe. You weren't born to be liked. You weren't born to speak softly and die slowly. You were born to become something they can't categorize. Something that lives before it explains itself. That's what they fear. A man who is no longer nameable, who no longer plays their game, who no longer speaks their script, who doesn't ask for a seat at the table, because he's building a kingdom that makes their table irrelevant. That's what happens when you leave the symbolic, when you no longer chase status or approval, when you no longer define yourself by your reflection or your resume. You become untouchable, not because you have everything, but because you are no longer owned. That is freedom. But here's the brutal truth. That freedom feels like death before it feels like power. Because when you break the mask, there's nothing underneath but silence, void, chaos. You feel like nothing. You question everything. You don't know who you are, and it terrifies you. That's the real. That's what Lacan says we spend our lives avoiding. The part of life that can't be put into words. The raw, unstructured, unfiltered self that lives outside the system. Most men never face it. They return to the script. They beg to be defined. They ask others, what should I be? Who should I love? What should I do? And in doing so, they give their life away in exchange for comfort. But not you. You've reached the point where the script no longer satisfies. The mirror no longer reflects. The language no longer defines. You're ready for the silence, for the descent, for the annihilation of every false identity you've worn. Because you know that only through that destruction can the truth emerge. Not the perfect man, not the polished man, not the man society approves of, but the real man. And when you find him, when you speak from him, your voice will sound different, not louder, but clearer, sharper, honest, and people will feel it. They won't know why, but they'll stop and listen, because real speech cuts through illusion. It's rare, it's dangerous, and it's yours. This is where you decide whether you want to continue living as an echo, or rise as a man who no longer begs for reflection, recognition, or reward. Because now you see it. The mirror, it was never real. The language, it was never yours. The image you've spent your life trying to maintain, it was never who you were. And the cost of clinging to that image, everything. Your peace, your direction, your soul. So let it die. Let the false self burn. Let the polished persona collapse. Let the version of you that only knew how to please, how to apologize, how to pose for attention, die screaming. Because you are not here to maintain an illusion. You are here to shatter it. Lacan didn't offer a path for cowards. He offered a razor. Cut away the mask or bleed under it forever. You've been living as a ghost in your own life, haunting a house that was built for someone you never were, wearing clothes tailored to your captor's standards, speaking in tones that made them feel safe, loving in ways that kept you small. But there's nothing small about the man you were meant to become, the man you are when you stop performing, the man you are when you stop narrating your existence through the vocabulary of weakness and fear. The man who no longer needs to be liked because he's too busy living. He doesn't smile when he's uncomfortable. He doesn't nod when he disagrees. He doesn't soften his voice just to make the insecure feel better about their mediocrity. He speaks, he walks, he leads. And not because he wants followers, but because he refuses to be led by illusions. This is the masculine power Lacan pointed toward, even if he never dared romanticize it. Because when you stop needing the mirror, when you stop craving the image, when you abandon the script, you face what most men never have the guts to face. The real, the raw, untamed, undefined force of your being. Your instincts, your chaos, your order, your silence, your rage, your divinity, all of it. All that was once labeled too much finally becomes just enough. You stop chasing control and start embracing sovereignty. And suddenly, you no longer fear rejection, because the man who is rejected for his truth is 10,000 times freer than the man who is accepted for his lie. You no longer fear her leaving, because if she only loves the version of you that reflects her needs, then she was never loving you to begin with. You no longer fear failure, because you've already failed by living as someone else. You no longer fear solitude, because the man who has found himself can never be truly alone. This is what it means to awaken. Not to become better, but to become real. To live without apology. To speak without filter. To love without dependency. To act without waiting for the green light from a world built on compromise and cowardice. You become the origin point, the axis around which your world spins. Not out of arrogance, not out of delusion, but because you've stopped outsourcing your identity to systems that never had your best interest in mind. You are no longer a consumer of roles. You are the creator of reality. That's what they fear. That's why they keep feeding you reflections. Because a man who no longer needs them, a man who doesn't flinch when the image is destroyed, is a man they cannot control, seduce, or cancel. He is not safe. He is sovereign. So now, you ask yourself, not in theory, but in fire, who are you without the reflection? Who are you when no one's watching? Who are you when the mask falls off, and the silence meets your breath, and no one claps for the version of you that emerges? Are you willing to live that man's life? Because that life is yours, if you're willing to take it. But no one will hand it to you. No one will reward you for choosing it. In fact, the more real you become, the more the world will reject you. But that rejection, that isolation, that cold, brutal freedom, that's the price of truth. And if you're man enough to pay it, then congratulations. You are no longer a mirror. You are no longer an echo. You are no longer owned. You are whole. Not perfect, not complete, not even understood, but whole. And there is nothing more dangerous, nothing more beautiful than a man who has stopped looking for himself in others and has finally found himself in silence. This is your moment. This is your fire. Burn. If this hits something real in you, not as entertainment, but as a mirror you are finally ready to break, then do something with it. Don't just nod and move on. That's how men stay stuck. Like the video and subscribe if you know this is the kind of truth that more men need to hear. Not sugar-coated, not diluted, but raw and real. This channel isn't for everyone. It's for the few who are done pretending. If that's you, stay. We've got more work to do.